So, Ian, what did you do after your Phantom tour?
Well, I was on a 3-year tour, and I was on a thing called a short service commission. So I knew I had 8 years in the Air Force, and I knew at the end of Germany, my options were probably to go to the weapons instructor course, and then be a QY, a qualified weapons instructor, and then go to a Lucas squadron or a Watersham or somewhere. And pretty early on, I'd always tried to engineer, having spoken to my father, how could I become a pilot? And the first year I flew in Germany, it was great fun. The second year, I was learning everything like a sponge. And the third year, I felt very vulnerable and sitting in the back seat because I knew I wanted to be a pilot. So I think I've written a couple of books, but I flew with the station commander, a guy called John Allison, who's a very famous pilot. And I was always happy to fly with anybody, really, whereas other people weren't. So off we went on a very poor visibility day, almost had a mid-air collision, and I managed to save the pair of us, as it were, without sounding too dramatic. I could tell you the whole story, but it would take up a whole interview. And he obviously was impressed with me, and he said, well, if you want to go and be a pilot, I'll back you. And so I had the backing of the station one, I had the backing of my father, and I became a pilot. The pilot training bit, is outside the scope of this interview, but at the end of it, I became a Lightning pilot, which is going to be short-lived because the Lightning only had less than 2 years left to go in service. And I guess it was very lucky that I got the Lightning with so long to go. They probably could have kept guys on it, but they were at that time thinking that we were going to be the next generation of Eurofighter pilots, but that never really happened. So I flew the Lightning for 2 years, went to the Tornado and did all the stuff on the Tornado that I could possibly do. And the natural thing then was either to go to the Red Arrows or go to the weapons course or do an exchange tour. I've flown with the Red Arrows quite a few times, and much as I love what they do and everything, it wasn't really for me because I had a passion for flying fast jets and doing operational stuff, and I also had a passion for photography, and I just knew that if I was in the Red Arrows, I wouldn't be flying with my left hand and taking a picture with my right hand, and they'd probably get very annoyed with me. So I knew that was not for me, really. And I applied for, well, I think at the time there was various options. There was going to America to fly the F-15, going to Norway to fly the F-16, a few Norwegian, Dutch, F4 at Wittmanhaven or the Mirage 2000, and a few other strange things. But the exchange tours are only type specific. So the Draken exchange in Denmark was a Harrier pilot, so he went and flew the Draken. Right. The F-15E exchange pilot was a Tornado GR pilot. The F-117 pilot was a GR pilot. So as an air defense pilot, I really had the F-4F at Wittmanhaven, the F-16 in Holland at Leeuwarden, or the F-16 at Öland with the Norwegian Air Force, or the Mirage 2000, and probably the F-15C at Tyndall or Luke or somewhere. And I thought, well, from what I'd heard, going to America was the easy option. You spoke English and you could fly the F-15, which would be great. But I wanted to go and broaden my aspects of things and learn a language, which the Air Force taught you. And Dutch, I didn't think was a great language to learn for the future. And living in the south of France on the Mirage 2000 seemed like the best option. So that's what I plumped for. And I sort of lied a bit and said I spoke colloquial French, which was completely untrue. I could order a beer. And when I got the exchange tour, I was very apprehensive, thinking, wow, I've got to learn to fly the Mirage 2000, and I've also got to learn to be fluent in French. And they give you at the time there was a language school where all the spies went to North Luffenham, but that was all sort of folding up. So I went as a guinea pig to Cambridge and had pretty much a 101 with myself and another guy who was going to go and fly the, no, it wasn't the Fouga Magazine, he went to fly the PC-9 at Salon, and I was going to go to the Mirage 2000. So we learned the language, and it was a very, very long, protracted course learning to speak a different language in the Air Force. And once I had done the language course, I then went to tour, and I lived with a geriatric French family and immersed myself there for a month. Then I had to go to another course. And finally, I got to tour airbase to fly the Alpha Jet. And that, it's not part of the scope of this interview as well, but, that, again, was just mind-blowing. If you ever want to completely saturate your head with information, put yourself in a foreign country, speaking a different language that you don't really speak very well, and then on day one, they put you in the simulator in the front seat of the aeroplane and say, off you go. And in the afternoon, they put you in the back seat and say, right, off you go. You're off to go and do a 2v2 combat against Mirage F1s, which I did. And I was sat in the back of this Alpha jet, and the guy in the front was a general. And he was a guy called an abonné, and they're like learners, but they're officers that go to the staff college who then once a month come back and fly the Alpha jet, and then they go back to the staff college just to keep current. And I always remember, I'm sat in the back of this Alpha jet. I couldn't understand what was going on. It was all in French. And we were up at about 38,000 feet. We were all contrailing. And the next thing we saw were 2 Mirages. And I just said to him, brake right, because this Mirage was pitching in behind us. So he broke right as hard as we could. And the next thing I knew, we were in a fully developed spin.
Wow.
And the aeroplane departed. And so my head's banging against the side of the canopy. And I'm looking down, and this 8/8 cloud, I can just see the horizon spinning around. And my lasting memory was thinking, this is going to be really good. This is my first trip in the French Air Force, and I'm going to have to eject. I'm actually now in an Alpha jet. I'm completely out of control. I'm with a guy in the front who's probably flying once a month, and I could hear him over the microphone breathing, going, as he was trying to get recovery back of the aircraft. And eventually the airplane just sort of naturally flopped out of the spin, and off we went. And I thought, well, that's, good trip one. That's an interesting start. So I did that Alpha jet immersion, which again was, I didn't really learn an awful lot there, and then went to Dijon, where the Mirage OCU was. And I haven't looked at my logbook, but, I literally flew 3 or 4 flights, all in French, all the ground schools in French. And I eventually managed to find I think the Americans call it a Dash 1, or it's an aircrew manual for the Mirage 2000 in a secret cabinet. And it was the English translation of the Mirage 2000 for the Qatari Air Force. Oh. So I quickly stole that from a secret cabinet, found a photocopy, and made my own photocopy. Otherwise, I'd have had no idea how the Mirage 2000 worked. And started doing the course. All the briefings were in French, all the sorties were in French. Flying out of Dijon, we used to go to a little place called Dole and do ILSs there and a bit of instrument work. And I literally must have had, 3 or 4 flights, and that was it. And then I got sent down to Orange. And your first solo in the single-seater, because they didn't have single-seaters in Dijon, was at Orange. And I arrived on the squadron in the morning, didn't know anybody. I think the RAF guy who was ahead of me, he was the first guy to fly the Mirage 2000, he'd left, so he wasn't there to hold my hand. So I literally walked into the squadron, everyone spoke French, I was there, and I looked up on the ops board, and I must have got there for 7:30 for an 8:30 start or something, and on the ops board, the first sortie of the day was Black and Smith. And I thought, well, it's like the Air Force, they're going to try and wind me up here, and they'll make me lead a sortie. So I thought, well, I'm not going to sort of lose face here and go, he's trying to wind me up, this is a bit of a joke. I'll just run along with it, and I'll play with it. So I sort of, okay, Blacksmith, 1v1 combat. And I thought, this is going to be interesting. So off we go. And I sort of said to the guy, is there any briefing slides? And yeah, so I'll just keep running with this joke they're going to play on me. And I sort of cobbled together some sort of brief, goodness knows how, because I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And the guy, Smith, who happened to have an English name, was French, but he spoke a bit of English. He spoke English quite well. And I got to the stage where we were signing out the aircraft, and there was a Mistral that day, so it was a 45-knot wind. And I thought, well, very soon they're all going to come in and laugh and, jokes on us, and it's all over. And I signed the aircraft, and he said, right, okay, let's go to the hangar. I signed for the aircraft, and I walk out to this single-seat Mirage I'd never flown before in my life. Wow. And I thought very soon they're all going to come around the corner and surprise, it's a joke. Yeah. And I got strapped in, and nobody came round, and then I did all the checks that I could do, and went on the radio, and he was there, and we started up. And I thought, maybe this isn't a joke. So I shut the canopy and taxied out, and we both taxied out together. And I remember distinctly that in the head-up display, it only worked at something like 50 knots or something. So when you were taxiing out, if you weren't doing 50 knots, it didn't show. But I remember the wind was so strong that day, it was showing 50 knots. I thought, wow, this is 50-knot wind. So we took off, and I think I was leading him, which was very strange. So I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. We went out over the Mediterranean Sea, and we set up in the combat area for visual combat. And we set outwards turn for combat go, which I led. Inwards turn go, and we turned inbound, And I hadn't a clue what I was doing, and lo and behold, he gunned me 3 times. And I thought, no, this is going to be interesting. And we reached a certain fuel level, and I thought, well, we better return back to Orange now. And GCI came on the radio and said, no, Orange is too windy there. You've got to divert to Easter. And I'm thinking, well, where the heck's Easter? I didn't really know where that was. So I managed to get my map out and find where Easter was, and we landed. And I taxied in, and I thought, that was a fairly exciting arrival on the squadron. I'd never flown a single-seater. It was in a foreign country. I was leading it. We were doing combat on my very first trip, proper full-on air-to-air combat. And then we divert. So we diverted, and I shut down, and my airplane had a problem. So we were sat there the whole day while the wind calmed down. And eventually they sent a 2-seater. And, the sands of time, I've forgotten why it happened, but it ended up that it was 5 o'clock at night. It was around about January, so it was getting dark. There was a 2-seater there and a single-seater, and the deputy squadron boss turned up, and he said, right, Ian, he said, we're going to fly back together and we'll land at Orange. So he gets this briefing sheet out, and he starts briefing, and he says, d'accord, meaning, you okay, you understand, tu compris? And I went, yeah. So I just sort of nodding at yes to everything. And I get into the single seater, which I've never flown solo either. So I make sure that the back seat is all strapped up. I get in the single seater on my own. He tacks up, and he's leading me. So he gets onto the end of the runway, this huge runway at Easter, and he said, we're going to do a 30-second stream or 15-second stream. He lets the brakes off. We let the brakes off and plugs in the afterburner. Huge, great ball of flame comes out the back. Off he goes. I tap my stopwatch, look at my watch, and go, right, 15 seconds, let the brakes off. And as I look ahead, he literally does like a lightning and puts into this vertical climb. So I thought, well, I better do the same thing. So I got a headboard, put the undercarriage up, and then just pulled as hard as I could. Now, looking back on it, I can't have been very high off the ground. And again, this thing just snapped into the vertical. And I sort of staggered away in the vertical, and then I had to try and find him. Eventually, I found him. And then off we headed to the Alps, and it's almost pitch black now. And I'm sort of trying to find him. I can see his nav light on the wing, and I sort of come into sort of loose, close formation on him, and we whiz around the Alps, and we do something. I can't remember what we did. And by the time we come back to Orange, it is absolutely pitch black. So I've never done a dual check at night. I've never flown a Mirage 2000 at night. Now I'm on my own in a 2-seater landing at night. So I land, taxi in, and then all the squadron are there, ready to meet me, and they've got champagne and everything. And there's a tradition in the French Air Force, and I haven't got it with me, but they give you what's called a pin, and it's a little metal badge, and on the back of it you have your PL number, which is a patrouille leader, I think it is, and I'm number 145. So I'm number 145 operational pilot on the EC-25 Ile-de-France. And they give you that, and it's in the bottom of the jar, and I didn't know that, and I almost swallowed it. And then you have that on your uniform. And I'm thinking, wow, that's day one. I've been solo in a single-seat Mirage. I've led a sortie. I've diverted. I've flown a 2-seat Mirage solo, and I've been night current all in one. That would take me 3 months in the Air Force to do. And I'm operational, because the way they look at that, if you've been an operational pilot before, well, you've got to be operational. So there's no backup. I am now a fully operational, day-night qualified Mirage 2000 pilot in one day.